Imagine a world where every action is driven by compassion, a world where people genuinely care for one another, where empathy guides decisions, and kindness is the default mode of interaction. Picture what that would look like in your daily life. How different would your day be if everyone you encountered was focused on your well-being? How different would the world be? Welcome to the transformative power of compassion, a cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy. Today, we're going to explore why compassion is so vital, how it can reshape our lives, and what Buddhism teaches us about cultivating this essential quality. At its core, compassion is the wish for others to be free from suffering and the willingness to act on that wish. It goes beyond mere empathy or sympathy. While empathy involves feeling another's pain and sympathy acknowledges it, compassion drives us to alleviate it. This active concern for the well-being of others is not just a passive feeling. It's a call to action. In Buddhism, compassion, often referred to as karun, is seen as one of the highest virtues. The Buddha himself is often depicted as the embodiment of compassion, tirelessly working to alleviate the suffering of all beings. But why is compassion so important in Buddhist teachings? Why is it emphasized alongside wisdom as one of the two wings necessary for enlightenment? Buddhist philosophy teaches that all beings are interconnected. The concept of interdependent origination, or pratititya samutpada, suggests that everything arises in dependence upon multiple causes and conditions. Nothing exists in isolation. We are all part of a vast web of existence. This understanding naturally leads to compassion because it highlights that the suffering of others is not separate from our own. When we see another person in pain, Buddhism encourages us to recognize our shared humanity. Their suffering is our suffering, and by alleviating their pain, we alleviate our own. This is why the Buddha taught that cultivating compassion is essential for anyone seeking to overcome suffering and reach enlightenment. In fact, the path to enlightenment is often described as a balance between wisdom and compassion. Wisdom allows us to see the true nature of reality, that all things are impermanent and interconnected. Compassion motivates us to act on this wisdom by helping others. Together, they form a complete path to awakening. But let's bring this down to earth. How does compassion manifest in our daily lives? How can we practice it in a way that makes a tangible difference, both for ourselves and others? One of the simplest ways to practice compassion is through metta or loving-kindness meditation. This practice involves sending thoughts of love and kindness to ourselves, our loved ones, those we're neutral about, and even those we have conflicts with. The aim is to break down the barriers that separate us from others and cultivate an attitude of goodwill towards all beings. As you begin your day, take a few moments to wish for the happiness and well-being of those around you. It could be as simple as silently wishing the person next to you on the bus a good day, or offering a kind word to a stressed-out coworker. These small acts of compassion ripple outwards, creating a more positive environment not just for others, but for yourself as well. Compassion is not just an internal practice. It is also a guide for our actions. Consider how you might approach a difficult situation with compassion. Instead of reacting with frustration or anger, how might you respond with understanding and care? This doesn't mean you have to accept negative behavior, but it does mean approaching challenges with a mindset that seeks to reduce harm and promote healing. One of the central tenets of Buddhism is the recognition and reduction of suffering, known as dukkha. The Buddha taught that life is filled with suffering, but he also provided a path to overcome it. Compassion is a critical component of this path because it directly addresses the root causes of suffering, our attachment to self, our aversions, and our ignorance. These root causes are often described as the three poisons in Buddhist teachings. The attachment to self refers to the deep-seated tendency to prioritize our own needs, desires, and identity above those of others. This self-centeredness leads to craving and clinging, which are sources of suffering because they are based on the mistaken belief that happiness can be found in transient external conditions. When we cling to things, whether they are material possessions, relationships, or even ideas, we inevitably suffer because all things are impermanent. Aversion, the second of the three poisons, is the flip side of attachment. While attachment pulls us towards things we desire, aversion pushes us away from things we dislike or fear. This aversion can manifest as anger, hatred, or avoidance, and it prevents us from seeing situations clearly. Instead of addressing problems with a calm and open mind, aversion causes us to react defensively or aggressively, often exacerbating the suffering of ourselves and others. Ignorance, the third poison, is the fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of reality. It is the failure to see the interconnectedness of all things, the impermanence of all phenomena, and the emptiness of a fixed, independent self. Ignorance fuels both attachment and aversion, keeping us trapped in cycles of suffering. It is only through wisdom that we can dispel this ignorance and see the world as it truly is. Compassion is the antidote to these poisons. By cultivating compassion, we begin to loosen the grip of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. When we develop a genuine concern for the well-being of others, our focus shifts away from our own desires and fears. We start to see beyond the illusion of a separate self and recognize our shared experience of suffering and joy. This broader perspective naturally leads to less attachment to our own cravings and less aversion to what we perceive as threats. Moreover, compassion helps to dissolve ignorance by fostering a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of all beings. When we act compassionately, we acknowledge that our actions have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for the entire web of life. This understanding helps to break down the barriers that ignorance builds, allowing us to live in a way that is more in harmony with the true nature of reality. When we act out of compassion, we begin to loosen the grip of self-centeredness. We start to see beyond our own desires and fears, recognizing that others are just like us, struggling, yearning for happiness, and trying to avoid pain. This shift in perspective can profoundly alter how we interact with the world. Consider this. When someone cuts you off in traffic, your immediate reaction might be anger or irritation. But if you take a moment to reflect on that person's situation, perhaps they're in a hurry due to an emergency, or maybe they're having a difficult day, you might find that your anger dissipates, replaced by understanding or even a desire for their well-being. This is compassion in action, transforming a moment of potential suffering into one of connection. Buddhist teachings often emphasize that compassion is not only beneficial for others, but it is also deeply enriching for our own lives. When we cultivate compassion, we nurture inner strength and resilience. Compassion opens the heart, making us more empathetic and understanding. This doesn't make us weaker or more vulnerable. Rather, it fortifies us with a sense of purpose and connection that transcends personal struggles. When we approach the world with compassion, we find that our own suffering lessens. This is because compassion helps us to move beyond the confines of our own ego, allowing us to engage with the world from a place of love rather than fear or anger. In this way, compassion becomes a source of profound inner peace and contentment. In Buddhism, compassion is one of the four immeasurables, or Brahma-viharas, along with loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These four qualities are called immeasurable because they can be developed infinitely and applied universally without discrimination. Practicing these qualities helps us to open our hearts and minds to others, fostering a sense of universal love and concern. Compassion in this context becomes a powerful force for good, not just in our personal lives, but in the world at large. By cultivating compassion, we contribute to a more peaceful, harmonious society. Of course, cultivating compassion isn't always easy. We all have moments when we feel impatient, indifferent, or even hostile towards others. These feelings are natural, but they can be obstacles to developing a compassionate heart. One way to overcome these obstacles is by recognizing our common humanity. No matter our differences, we all experience pain, loss, and joy. We all have fears and hopes. By focusing on these shared experiences, we can begin to see others not as strangers or adversaries, but as fellow beings on the same journey. Another approach is to practice self-compassion. It's difficult to be compassionate towards others if we're harsh and critical of ourselves. Buddhism teaches that we must extend the same kindness to ourselves that we offer to others. By nurturing our own well-being, we become better equipped to care for those around us. Compassion has a ripple effect. When we act compassionately, it inspires others to do the same. Think about a time when someone showed you unexpected kindness. How did it make you feel? Chances are, It lifted your spirits and perhaps even motivated you to pass that kindness on to someone else. This ripple effect is how compassion can change the world. It starts small, with individual acts of kindness and understanding, but it can grow to encompass entire communities, nations, and beyond. The more we practice compassion, the more we contribute to a world where empathy and care are the norm rather than the exception. As we reflect on the power of compassion, it becomes clear that this quality is not just a noble ideal in Buddhist philosophy. It is a practical tool for transforming our lives and the world around us. Compassion is a source of strength, peace, and joy. It helps us to connect with others, to alleviate suffering, and to live in harmony with the world. Compassion is also a practice, something we cultivate and nurture over time. It's a path we walk every day, in big ways and small. And the beauty of this path is that it's open to everyone. Whether you're deeply immersed in Buddhist practice or simply looking to lead a more compassionate life, the principles of compassion are accessible and beneficial to all. As we move forward, let's consider how we might bring more compassion into our lives. How can we act with greater kindness and understanding? How can we contribute to the well-being of others? And how can we cultivate a heart that seeks to alleviate suffering wherever it arises? The journey of compassion is ongoing, but every step we take on this path makes a difference. By embracing compassion, we not only transform ourselves, we contribute to a more compassionate world, one where suffering is met with care and kindness, and where all beings can thrive.